Redditors. What's the most unbelievable thing that has ever happened in the existence of mankind, and what makes it so hard to grasp the reality that the event occurred? A dude named Tsutomu Yamaguchi survives the Hiroshima bomb despite being very near ground zero. Then already being heavily injured travels to Nagasaki and reports for work already being bandaged. Once again he survives despite being around 3 kilometers from ground zero, and then lives until 2009. Voyager leaving our solar system. Those probes may outlive humankind. Maybe the Mongolian invasion of Japan, which was blighted not once, but twice by sheer luck as typhoons, which only strike 2 or 3 times a year, wiped out their entire ship fleet. The Mongolians took it as an omen, and didn't invade again. A victory which would have been quite easy for them. That guy who died for 14 minutes, and then went on to win the jackpot on a scratch card twice. One of the times live on TV, when he was recreating the moment he'd done it. The moon. We landed on the moon. The moon, only 50 years after we built the airplane. We went to the moon. That a person can fall 33k feet without a parachute and survive. That's higher than Mount Everest. Vesna Vulovic. That the Mongolian civilization in the 13th century, armed only with horses, arrows, and steel, managed to sweep through and completely conquer the vast majority of the entire Eurasian landmass in only about 10 years, forming the largest contiguous land empire in history. There were over 12 million casualties, a record only surpassed 700 years later in World War II. How about the fact that we now routinely travel farther in a year than our ancestors did in their entire lives, using ground vessels powered by explosions? Humanity almost went extinct 72,000 years ago due to the Mount Toba eruption. Researchers estimate there were only 4,000 survivors in Africa. We figured out that turning millions/billions of electronic switches on and off could create a relatively accurate representation of the universe. Like, go ahead, try explaining a personal computer of any capacity to someone from 80 years ago. I think that humans invented forged metal. Like, how does that even happen? How do you, without knowing that metal is in ore, that ore is distinct from any old rock, and without knowing you can melt it, decide to stuff it in a hole, with coal or some other fuel, in such a way as to generate the heat to melt it, and then from there also make sure the metal pours out in a usable form? How do you make that series of decisions? It's always seemed so crazy to me. To me it has to be the fall of the Khwarezm Empire. The fact that the Mongols would destroy and kill every living creature if a city didn't surrender peacefully to Genghis Khan's army, in a time when they had no machine guns, and every Mongol soldier was supposedly given a quota for how many lives they had to claim, and filled sacks full of ears to confirm those kills. A lot of crazy stories from that conquest. Like the one where one of the Khan's son-in-laws died during one of the sieges, and when the Mongols finally took it over, they ordered every citizen be brought to the town center to be beheaded in front of the Khan's daughter as revenge, while she overlooked every execution lamenting her fallen husband, or the city where even the rats, dogs, and cats were all ordered to be slaughtered. Another really crazy story that I can remember had to be when a town heard of the Mongols coming. The citizens were divided between surrendering and fighting. When the Mongols got closer and tensions in the city were at their peak between the two parties, they fought amongst themselves, and the side that wanted to surrender won the struggle. And when they let the Mongols in, the leader of the army ordered the execution of everyone anyways, because you couldn't trust such men. Also, when the Mongols would finish destroying a town and move on to the next, they would often send a detachment back to the destroyed cities to kill any people who may have been hiding during the first attack and come upon them as they buried their relatives. The fact that Christendom in the 1230s and Islam as a whole in the 1250s might have been saved all cause Agoda Khan and Mang Khan died of alcoholism. Whenever the Great Khan died, all Mongol nobility in general stopped whatever the hell they were doing and went back to Mongolia to decide the new Khan. Can you imagine if these two didn't die of alcoholism? Can you imagine what a fully Mongol invaded Europe led by Subutai/Batu would have done to European history? Or what the course of Islamic history would have looked like if the Mongol war machine of 1255 led by Hulagu had attacked Mamluk Egypt? world history as we know it might be, because two Mongol cunts couldn't hold their freaking liquor, and that's just mind-boggling. One day two bipedal animals made some noises at each other and agreed upon a set meaning for those noises. Anything involving Rasputin, the magic Russian sex hobo. Not really an event, but the size of the universe itself. The speed of light is 300,000,000 meters per second. That basically means light can go around the Earth 7 times every second. Now, imagine going at that speed in a straight line for a year. The distance traveled would be around 220,000,000 times the circumference of the Earth. This is a light year. Now, that's already mind-boggling on its own. But that's not the end. Scientists estimate that the diameter of the observable universe is 93 billion light years. That's just the bit we can see. It's probably larger than that. Completely blows my mind every time. The way we somehow got through the Cold War without getting mutually destroyed has always amazed me. I just find it insane that dinosaurs actually existed. I mean, a Tyrannosaurus Rex was 13 feet tall, 45 feet long, 9 tons, had banana-sized teeth and a bite force of 12,800 c, had some of the sharpest senses of any animal to ever live, better vision than an eagle, better sense of smell than almost any other animal, extremely acute hearing, and was packed with muscle from head to toe, even compared to other similarly sized theropods. Even its relatively small arms could each lift around 400 lbs. When you describe it like that, it doesn't even sound like a real animal. It sounds like a movie monster, and that thing actually existed. Ted Cruz jokes aside, the Zodiac Killer still fascinates me. The fact that somebody was able to completely elude law enforcement to the point there are no leads to the killer's identity 50 years later is honestly amazing. The man who tried to assassinate Andrew Jackson had 2 different pistols jam. If there are alternate realities, we live in one that had a 1 in 100,000 chance of existing. While the Wild West era was going on, New York City had electric lights. You have more navigational power in your pocket than any ship to traverse the oceans, until about 30 years ago or so. George Washington peacefully transferring power was almost unprecedented. The fact that we exist. The World Wide Web, it represents the pinnacle of human achievement for a variety of reasons, from how it was conceived to how it still works. The thing about 1 in 6 people is related to Genghis Khan. He is the only person that, if he was still alive today, can say to almost anyone that he fucked her mom over the internet. Yersinia pestis, more commonly known as the Black Death, killed something north of 75 million people in the mid-14th century. This was something like 1/4 and 1/2 of the entire human race at the time. Like all cataclysms, it disproportionately affected the poor, resulting in a famine in following years because there was no one to work the fields. Furthermore, the demand for labor meant that skilled peasants had more access to money and education for their kids. The worst pandemic in history directly led to the emergence of the middle class. The start of World War I, a group of Serbian kids, called the Black Hand, were mad that their country was a colony of Austria. To state it very, very simply, they decide to kill the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a mega power, controlling a huge chunk of Europe. His name was Franz Ferdinand. Dude's in town, essentially as a PR stunt. And he's doing this JFK style motorcade parade. They decide to kill him with one of those Mario style bombs, you know the type. The background ones with a long fuse. The attack was in part organized by a young man named Gavrilo Princip. The plan was organized so that a handful of bombers would line the street and take their chances. For whatever reason, the caravan missed the first bombers completely. The next one washed out completely. As the caravan approaches the final bomber, he decides that it's now or never and go time. He springs out of the crowd and lobs a bomb at the convertible. It misses barely and deflects off the side panel, back into the crowd, killing bystanders and the bomber himself. The caravan speeds off, and the attempt is a bust. Dejected, our young anti-hero, Gavrilo, hastily exits and settles at a cafe. He orders a coffee and tries to act natural. Back to our speeding caravan, Franz Ferdinand tells everybody, hey, we can spin this into some good PR. We need to go support these innocents who are hurt from this bomb. He tells the driver to take him and his wife to the hospital. The driver agrees, but tells Franz that it is the opposite direction. They pull down a side street that is dead-ended. The driver begins to make a U-turn. Ironically, at the end of the street is the cafe, with Gavrilo sitting, open-jawed, at his target making a 5-point turn in a back alley. He jumps up and unloads his gun into the car, killing the prince and his wife. Within weeks, all of Europe is at war. Within months, most of the world is, and by the end as many as 21,000,000 human lives had been lost due to this moment in history. If some time traveler were able to appear to Prince Ip in that moment and tell him that the next 60 seconds would determine the fate of tens of millions, I wonder if that would change everything, or if he would still do it. Either way, it feels like a Tarantino movie, or the plot of Final Destination. The weird, hairpin turns in a couple people's lives could shape the next century of history. Without WW1 you don't have WW2. Without WW2 you don't have the Cold War. Without the Cold War, you don't have modern politics. And without all that, you don't have nukes. 9/11. ISIS. The invention of music. A universal system and language of something so simple, yet that holds so much power. Music has some serious power, and it uses math like the rest of the universe, but affects us in a totally different way than most anything. Given the pickup line my dad supposedly used, my birth. Edit. Since you guys asked, the line was so, when we point out, you've got to admit, it's ballsy. Did this thread get invaded by Mongols? Learning to contain and control energy, starting with the very first man-made fire. That two of the authors of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, died on the exact same day, 4 hours apart, and that day was July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration. The moon is the exact diameter and the exact distance from the Earth, to appear exactly the same size as the sun. This gives us eclipses in which the moon perfectly covers the sun. No more, no less. As vast as the universe is, what are the odds of finding another planet where this is true? Also, since the Earth's distance to the moon and sun vary, sometimes they appear to be slightly different sizes, but only slightly. The existence of paper currency, we somehow managed to make most of the people on the planet think that something has a certain worth, just because someone said so. Getting rid of smallpox forever. A disease that killed probably a billion people through history. Gone forever through mass vaccination. Crap. Limited to mankind only half. While I think getting to the moon is a huge accomplishment, I'd like to give a shout out to electricity. Like we harnessed this naturally occurring phenomenon to light the darkness. Create new revolutionary forms of entertainment, art, communications, and the spread of information. Humanity is old as frick. But we have had electricity for a blink of an eye compared to that. If we don't blow ourselves to hell soon, I think we can bring a new age we've never seen before. Like 4 generations ago, give or take, didn't have any of the electricity or electricity driven technology we have today. My grandfather, in his 80s now, probably knew a handful of old folks who didn't have it. Like that kind of old world lifestyle is within second-hand accounts. It's pretty wild. The Holocaust for obvious reasons. Suicide Squad is an Oscar-winning movie. That some of the Native American Apache warriors who broke out with Geronimo and fought a guerrilla war against the US Army were still alive to see the US drop Castle Bravo, the most powerful nuke the US ever tested. That people blow tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on Scientology and are also okay with their children signing a billion-year contract with them. I guess not so much that there are people that do it, but the fact that there are so many brings to mind a great quote by George Carlin. Think of how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that. Toba catastrophe theory, which says 75,000 years ago a volcano caused human population to drop to several thousand. We are all children of those survivors. Scientifically, how they theorize life on Earth was formed Currently, the most plausible theory is that billions of years of superstorms eventually unintentionally electrified atoms into perpetuating molecules cells, thus beginning life on Earth. As you can imagine, this event, even in the time span given, would be like winning the lottery and then some. An astronomically unlikely event, but one necessary to start everything we know as life on this planet. Screens. How the heck did people build a little flat piece of glass that projects stuff? And on top of that, making touch screens. It's just so bizarre. Okay, this may seem like a joke, but I think about this every year or so. The amount of people that had to frick each other so we could be here. Can you imagine? Yeah. Remember Egypt times with pharaohs and crap? You had family somewhere in those times. WW1. Family. Renaissance. Family. Castles and kings and craps. Family. Remember cave people? Yeah, they fricked each other for you to be here. Imagine the amount of combinations that happened so you could be here. Imagine all the times where people almost never fricked. Imagine all the times that someone fricked other person first before setting up with your Greek's 10,000 grandfather. It blows my mind. The thousands and thousands of years that people had to end up having a baby together so you could be here. I wonder how many of us are related now. It's amazing to me. Wish the animus was real, honestly. One time I won an argument with my girlfriend. When the British took Washington DC in the War of 1812, they burned the White House. The next day they were going to burn the House of Congress. The clouds began to swirl and the winds kicked up. A tornado formed in the center of the city and headed straight for the British on Capitol Hill. The twister ripped buildings from their foundations and trees up by the roots. British cannons were tossed around by the winds. Several British troops were killed by falling structures and flying debris. Tornadoes are exceptionally rare in DC. We transformed the mighty wolf into a Panamanian. We tricked sand into doing complex stuff really fast for us. And now the sand is becoming intelligent. Boy, let me tell you, we went to the freaking moon with 4 KB of memory. That a freaking dude sent a car from his car company to Mars in a rocket from his rocket company. Aztecs had better cities, infrastructure, beauty, etc. than most European cities at that time. That we flew humans to the freaking moon on top of that was essentially a great freaking firework. I mean, intellectually I understand what's going on with the physics, but I still don't quite believe that is actually worked, and we actually managed to do that. And do it on what is now 50 or 60-year-old technology. On Friday, the 3rd of August in the year 2018, millions of people believe that the earth is flat and the moon is a projection. The Haitian Revolution that 1. Completely eradicated their overlord's presence. 2. Defeated 3 European powers set on reconquering them multiple times. 3. Lost one of their premier founding fathers and still was successful. 4. Did this during the era of Napoleon. Not something that has happened yet, but the fact that mankind has the ability to cause a mass extinction event affecting the entire planet in just a moment's notice by splitting a few atoms. We were once sperm, like legit sperm. The internet. What is the internet? I honestly could not explain how it was created and how it works, but even further due to said technology, I have seen more naked women than all of my previous ancestors combined. That The Revenant is based on a true story. Leo DiCaprio is a great actor, but a guy actually survived that. In all mankind's existence, the most unbelievable and mind-blowing event occurred in 1997, when The Undertaker threw mankind from the top of the cage in Hell in a Cell. The US winning the Revolutionary War. The Tunguska event. An asteroid explodes over a remote area in Russia, and is considered the largest impact event on Earth. Yet there was no crater, just leveled trees, yet no one died, at least that we know of. What makes it unbelievable is that it had x 1000 the power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and cold caused extinction if it hit, but it didn't. It just blew up in the sky and leveled part of a forest. Religion. Whether you are religious or not, masses coming together under an ideology and it keeping it alive for thousands of years is pretty remarkable. Roanoke. Everybody knows they died, but do we really know what happened? the Big Bang, and even more. I can say time here, but the time before the Big Bang. I mean a time with no time or space. That just freaks me out on so many levels. That there have been 5 mass extinctions where 99.9% of all life on Earth has died out. Each time only around 0.1% of life became the staple for the next series of genomes for everything. Oh, and the fact that scientifically, we are currently at the beginning of the 6th extinction. You guys are listing some great things, but my 8-year-old daughter didn't like Frozen. How we made rocks to accept ones and zeros. That humans are basically abusing bugs in the physics engine to their advantage. Your fridge changes gas pressure to get cold, for example. Your computer is making billions of calculations a second from on and off switches. I'm not even gonna try to explain nuclear power. Not mankind. Sharkind. How the frick do saw-nose sharks exist? How the frick does that happen? The Spanish Inquisition. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. This would be a wonderful thread to read while high. World War I was 100-fold worse than anything you were ever taught about in school. It was a horrible hell on earth that turned parts of Europe into toxic, inhospitable landscapes. More people died in the first month of WWI than would die in the first 8 months of WWII. Entire villages, men and teenagers were wiped out in single days of battle. Bodies couldn't be moved out of trenches without the mover being shot and killed, so sometimes people who died would remain in the trenches for more than a year, decaying, and soldiers had to live with that. It was just freaking awful. Look up a detailed history of the Battle of Verdun. Verdun may have been the most horrific battle in the history of warfare. In previous European wars, maybe 15, 000, 30, 000 people total would die during the course. In WWI, 70, 000 died in the first week. Honestly, anything that isn't sticks and stones. Like, think about it. In the start there were trees in the ground, yet now there's this little thing that controls an arrow and a display powered by electricity. There's processors made from metal, essentially just metal, that make millions of calculations a second. All that came from the interactions between nature, trees, the ground, water, heat, and essentially smarter than monkeys. This thought alone pushes me to have an existential crisis whenever I really start thinking. Like, think about it. You're a Neanderthal in the woods. All you see is snow and a few trees. Some years later we have cars that work by combusting a liquid we find miles underground. We have an entire system for exchange of goods. We have machines that literally can see inside of our bodies and pinpoint exactly where there are errors in our bodies. We have some pills made from pressing ingredients that target these errors. We have computers, electricity, while all our ancestors had were sticks and stones. We landed on the thing that's in the sky at night for frick's sake. Imagine a Neanderthal knowing how the future would be. That's how I feel whenever this thought crosses my mind. The Higgs boson particle discovery. Firefly was cancelled after 1 season. That printer ink is more expansive than human blood. That is something I can't wrap my head around. Not exactly something that happened during the existence of mankind, but the Big Bang would be a pretty hard one to imagine, since it basically marked the start of time, and there is proof that it actually did happen. But it's still unbelievable, because it's such a big event in history, and nobody was around to witness it. Leicester winning the Premier League. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.